Okay. Hello, everyone.
Please wait. It'll tell us when live.
We're live. Oh, Sasha seems to have broken up a little bit. I'll just carry on talking then, whilst she reconnects. So this is today's special edition where I've seized the mess. I've thrown both Robbie and Graham out, and I'm here by myself. And we've got a lovely line out of women who are coming along later on. And right now I'm waiting for Sasha to come back, and here she is.
Hello, everybody.
How are you doing?
Happy Women's Day. I'm doing good. How are you, Helen?
I'm okay. I've been reading about things going on for International Women's Day, and I've been really quite shocked to see. I don't know if you saw it about the what was happening in France.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
Yesterday.
Yeah.
I'm absolutely shocked. Although probably not as shocked as I should be.
Right. It's at the point where we sort of cease to be surprised at these horrors, but it was truly horrifying. Yeah, what happened in Paris? Should we explain for people?
Oh yes. So there was a demonstration, or maybe just a sort of march in solidarity with prostituted women, and they started to be surrounded by a mob of let's call them liberals, for want of a better word.
I think they've been termed like queer activists, we could call them, or trans activists. Yeah.
And it seemed as if there was quite a lot of shouting and name calling, and then bordering into violence, eggs thrown, and a lot of threats, and some very, very frightened women. Very frightened by the sound of it. And then I saw that somebody had painted, and I think it's on that monument, and I think it was from yesterday, the most astonishing message, which was save a trans, kill a TERF. That's actually written down. The idea that we should actually be killing women on International Women's Day.
You know, it's scary how this is really normalizing violence against women. And, you know, what really got me, Helen, was someone posted on Twitter a video of an egg being thrown right into the face of Marguerite Stern. She was one of the leaders there, radical feminist woman. And the person who posted it on Twitter captioned it therapy. So this is a video of an egg hitting her in the face, and he said therapy. To me, that was just the most angering, outrageous, infuriating thing, and it just made me think of
that's
history of treating women in these horrible ways and calling it therapy, and
that's incredibly upsetting, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And I think one of the things that really also shocked me was the number of people justifying this violence.
Right.
And this is becoming a really big problem now. The justification of this by saying things like, yes, but you're denying the existence of a whole community. You want to kill a whole community. Your opinions are actually killing marginalized people, and therefore it becomes sort of justified. And I don't really know what we can do about this, because like social media platforms like Twitter, I think, are colluding in it by not at all taking seriously any, you know, when women are called TERFs,
right,
and when there's violence against TERFs, or, you know, all of these memes.
I mean, they think they've taken care of the problem when they kick you off Twitter, right? Like,
yes, that's right. That's right.
The most dangerous element. Yeah, it's insane. And I had people comment that too when I posted about Marguerite and the egg and the Paris protest. They said, no, she's a transphobe. Like, why are you supporting her? Transphobes get eggs in the face. TERFs get eggs in the face. You know, and it's like you're saying, they're justifying it.
I saw a shocking statistic earlier, which was about the number of Americans who believe that it is okay to use political violence for political ends.
Oh, okay.
And I don't know if you saw this. I mean, I only saw it today, and I wrote the numbers down. So back in 2017, it was around 7% of Americans, and both Republicans and Democrats virtually identical, about 7%. Mm-hmm. And then it's gone up exponentially. And by 2020, last year, it was around 35% of Americans feel that political violence is justified for political ends.
Wow.
And this, I think, is incredibly shocking because you see it with women. There's the open calls for violence against women called TERFs. It's just open. It's just completely accepted. And then the use of the justification of, well, it's their fault. If they didn't have these opinions, we wouldn't have to perpetuate violence against them. And it's not even opinions that we actually have. What do I want? I want single-sex spaces for women and girls, and I want them to be able to play sports away from males.
Right.
That is it.
And we want to be able
to all I want.
Define the word. We want to have the word mean what it means and not have to lie about what the word woman means. And, I think it's really partisan, too. I mean, people seem to support violence towards their political ends and not towards their opponent's political ends. I mean, that statistic that you just read is really shocking because we just had this Capitol riot, right after the election, and it was called an insurrection. And a lot of people said everyone who was involved with that or even supported it or even voted for Trump is guilty and like irredeemable. But if 20% actually
35% of Americans feel that political violence is justified. And I imagine if you polled the UK, in fact, I'd be interested to see if we polled the UK. Note to self.
Yeah.
Crowdfund for poll. But the fact,
and it's
that
the loss of the value of speech too. It's like, what about battling it out with words? Where did that go?
Well, it's an interesting question, isn't it? And it's something that I've been really wondering about here. And it does occur to me that online arguing has given women a voice. I mean, obviously, it's also taken it away, but it did for a while give women a voice, but it gave them a sort of equal voice, an egalitarian voice. I mean, I think I've made this point before that women were no longer frightened of the sort of the possible violence, the threat of violence, not even the threat of violence, the understanding that what male violence can do, and moderate their tone, maybe not speak out as much as they would want. And online, suddenly we had a forum where we were all equal and we could all talk, and there was a tweet and response. Right. But I think that this maybe has angered a lot of men. That and this is a way of sort of restoring the natural order of things as they see it, which is to silence women with threats, but really, really suggest that violence is something that is correct to be used, should be used against.
It's virtuous. It's like, I think it started with like punch and Nazi rhetoric from the left, from sort of Antifa world. And then now the word Nazi has lost all meaning to people because, I get called a Nazi. I'm a Jew. It's hilarious, but it's ridiculous. I mean, so when they punch a Nazi became so justified, and then now anyone you disagree with is a Nazi.
Yes, that is, I mean, again, I think I want to refer back to that tweet by Brunskell, where somebody says, what are we going to do about the problem with US gender critical women? And so the reply is, well, we have guns, and then there's the comparison to Nazis, and Twitter didn't take it down. People reported it and they didn't take it down.
God, I don't even know what to make of. I mean, if you're going to have this moderation, I don't understand, because Twitter is all pro moderation and censorship. And, they had enough power to take down the president of the United States and to silence his ability to speak on the platform. But they can't stop these threats against regular women.
Well, I can't help thinking it's because, it's purposeful, right? Twitter is one of the most successful tech companies in the world. if they really wanted to build algorithms to maybe sort of filter out this sort of speech. Can't help thinking that they could have by now.
Yeah, you would think. Right. Oh, Angela, hello. Welcome.
Angela, hello.
Hello, witches.
Hi, how are you, Angela?
Good, thank you very much. Thanks for having me there.
Oh God, it's a pleasure. Oh, we're so happy that you're here. This is such a great thing, and I do want to say thank you to Graham for giving us his platform for
Yes, thank you, Graham.
for the day, for the evening.
For the team as well.
Yes, everybody. Graham and Artie and Helen, all you guys are awesome.
Angela, is it possible you could turn your volume up a little? Do you have your microphone?
It's at the top. I'm going
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
That's good.
So, Angela, do you want to give us a bit of background
Yes.
about yourself?
Yes, my name is Angela White. I'm a founding member of the Get the Hell Out, a lesbian activist group. We are fighting for lesbian visibility, and we are also known for having disrupted Pride in London in 2018. We basically see two major problems with the trans ideology, specifically targeting lesbians at the moment. I mean, for a few years, really, the cotton ceiling and the transitioning of lesbian. Do you want me to go a little bit on to explain what it is? Yeah. So the cotton ceiling is the idea that as a lesbian, we should include male who identify as trans women because they are attracted to women in our dating pool and accept them as sexual partners, even though we know that 80% of them roughly keep their male genitals. I mean, it's not a detail. And what's happening with lesbians is really that we are getting chucked out of lesbian dating sites. We are getting chucked out of lesbian groups because we just assert that we are same-sex attracted and not same-gender attracted. So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect, of course, has always been the transitioning of lesbian, as we see that a lot of women who escape womanhood are same-sex attracted to. So that's our two main axes.
Angela, can we get your reaction to what happened yesterday in Paris with La Amazon and Marguerite Stern?
Yeah, well, as I was here listening to what you were saying, and I agree that it's horrendous. It's not surprising. We've seen a similar type of reaction here in the UK. My perspective is that the Me Too movement in France has been extremely successful, maybe more than in the UK. It's really been taken on by feminists. And I agree with what you were saying, that the cancel culture is a reaction to that. Like the tools that we had with the Me Too to say, this man did this man did that, is then returned against us, and this woman is a TERF, and then justifying violence. It's maybe that's why it's more violent there. I find that MRAs and trans activists are generally physically more violent in France than they are in English-speaking countries, but we'll see about that. Yes, really terrible. So sisterhood is not great, of course.
Would you tell us a bit about the what happened at Pride?
Okay. What do you want to know?
Well, how it came about. What was going through your mind?
Well, we had been frustrated. I'm being polite here. We've been frustrated with the LGBT organization for quite some time, and a couple of us, so Sarah and myself, had the same idea to show lesbian visibility there and to oppose, so to have a confrontational, disobedient protest there. So we just gathered some women, and you do what you do when you don't have a platform. Really, you do direct action. It's pretty much it. So we organized this, and we just jumped in. One of the things is we had never been to Pride because we have always been felt excluded from Pride. So we didn't know the level of security, and maybe had we known this, we would instead we would have thought, oh, there's a way. But when there's a will, there's a way, and we traveled across the country to go there. So we just basically found a way.
Sometimes maybe it's best not to know, and then you just you're there at that point. Were you frightened?
Well, I think, yeah. Like the adrenaline level was high. Yeah, really. thought, I was telling everybody, stand your ground, because we have literally 30 seconds, they will remove us. And we were actually really surprised that they did not remove us. They were really keen to make us go, but they realized we were lesbians and they couldn't really do that. And
yes, I think the visual would have been really quite
yes.
bad.
Yes.
Escorting, sort of physically escorting lesbians away from Pride. But I wouldn't have been surprised if they had.
Well, it happened to me. We replicated a smaller version of that action, the two of us, in Swansea, and I had been physically removed from Swansea Pride. Of course, there's less hoo-ha and media there, but they've done that, yeah.
Angela, do you feel any different, any change this year in the atmosphere and the climate around these issues?
Yes.
Yeah.
I was thinking about that a lot because it's not just this year, but I got into this debate in 2012, and at the time, we were 6 women. I knew 6 women in the country who were ready to take action. All of them were lesbian, and it felt we did things. We did small-scale things that you can do when you're like such a little group. But now, it's really amazing the amount of groups are forming every day. Women are joining all the time, and for me this is really, really positive. I know I hear a lot of women saying, it's horrible, and of course the violence is horrible. I'm not saying that the threats are not real, that the threats to our rights are not real. They are, but in terms of collective, we've never been in such a strong position, and I'm really, really hopeful, to be honest.
Yes, I think that's true. And Sasha, I think this is something that we were saying. This has forced women to connect with other women and to take joy in other women and to do things like the things that you've been forced to do, Sasha, yourself, because you've had to. Because you've been sort of kicked out of so many places. You've had to make your own.
Yeah, but it's been a blessing. I mean, I think that if I hadn't been kicked out of, it was the literary industry here in the US for me, I think it would be a nightmare. I can't describe it in any other way, because I would have very soon come to realize that I had to suppress my thoughts and suppress the truth. That would have been so awful. And then instead I got to meet all these intelligent, free-thinking, amazing people.
One thing that I was thinking too, that I know a lot of women who are like, very frustrated. They know they want to act, they're scared, rightfully so. But I wanted to say this, really, it's less scary to be in the battle than to wait to be outed because that sex is real. And so I want to encourage everybody, to join, because also you have fun, happy days.
Right. Yes, no, I agree. I mean, there's, I think people can see it as well, which is one of the reasons I think that the people are so active in trying to silence women, and also kicking them out of platforms does mean separating them. It is like somebody was talking about the parallels with domestic violence the other day, and the idea that what happens there is that the woman is isolated from her friends and from her networks, and this I think is part of what's happening by the idea that women should be thrown off Twitter. They should be isolated, and their networks that has been formed and the cross networks are cut, so that so women are separated from each other.
I think that the purpose of the word "serf," that's what they do. They divide us with that word, so you go into the wrong side, as they say. But there's nothing better to create an activist than to call her a serf, really. I mean,
right, exactly.
That is
exactly
true.
Right. Yeah, I was just thinking about that.
That's why we're here.
Right.
Yes, it's a good point, and and you ask when women sort of tell their stories about how they got to where they did, or where they have got to, and a lot of it is, I mean, for me, it was years and years ago, almost 10 years ago, it was seeing women being called TERF, and I think I've told this story a number of times, in that I thought, well, I'm not one of those. I'm not one of those women. I'm liberal and I'm fair. So these women must have done something really bad to have got that. But obviously, you realise very, very quickly that they have not. And in fact, they're brilliant women. They're smart and they're excellent and they're interesting. And But you know, they are really good. Hey, Heather, hello.
And brave.
I'm so enjoying this. That suddenly more women arrive. It's like when it's like you're at a party and you're talking,
I know.
and then somebody else comes in.
Yeah. So we were just talking about how the word TERF operates to single out women, to separate women, but that it can have this backwards effect of making women curious. Why are people being called TERFs? And then they're like, oh, this is a really reasonable point of view that is actually grounded in truth. And then they might become a TERF.
Yeah.
So Heather, how is your International Women's Day going so far?
It's going fine. I've been working quite hard on something I'm writing, and tweeting, and yeah.
Excellent.
But just to pick up on what Angela was saying, I think we've moved astonishingly in the past few years. I was later to this than Angela. I didn't really understand what was going on till about 2016, and it was very lonely. So that must have been extremely lonely for you, Angela. It was very, very lonely. And there was that sense that once I started realizing what was going on and talked about it, that people were so resistant to hearing it. The idea was that somehow the problem must be within you, because it sounded so phantasmagorical that you know, to realize that this men's rights movement was very active, was going to take away our rights as you see it doing, and that unless we did something about it very quickly, the whole political landscape would have changed, you know, irreparably. And to try to talk about this was a really silencing thing. And you know, in my own personal history, I've been the attempts to silence me have been there. I'm not claiming anything in particular. That other women have been silenced too, but the realization that we couldn't talk about our rights without being gagged, and the fact that people wanted to gag us demonstrated to me the whole seriousness of this.
Oh yes, definitely. I mean, you know, the fact that people want to silence us simply for talking about very simple women's rights that we actually already have. Single-sex sports, single-sex spaces. The fact that people's reactions isn't, well, let's talk about this. Let's look at some stats. Let's sort of say, well, maybe actually we don't need this. But that's not the reaction, is it? The reaction is prevent this woman from saying it. Prevent these women from talking.
You know, by the time I understood what was going on, what was also frightening was the power of the trans lobby, actually, you know, institutional power to step in and attempt to shut us down. Was astonishing. How had they achieved such power was one of the questions that I asked myself, and that I've been trying to think about and analyze ever since. But so the job is huge to roll back on that.
What do you think? How have they achieved such power?
Oh, I think it's, you know, a multitude of things. A lot, you know, as Jennifer Billick writes about, you know, there is a huge amount of money involved in this. There are political ideologies that are being pushed and supported. I think it sounds like a conspiracy theory, that, you know, from people who are not particularly trans, but who would like to see women's rights eroded for one reason or another. And we could talk a lot about that. I've written a book about it, Transgender Body Politics. So I've written
Buy the book.
Yes,
Heather,
certainly.
Heather, I wanted to ask you. Oh, sorry. Go on. Finish.
No, go on. I'll talk forever if you don't stop me.
So I was just going to say, you know, when I realized everything that was going on, and I realized that you couldn't say the truth, you couldn't say that a trans woman is not a woman without being totally lambasted and punished. I was in university, and so I was in undergraduate, but I was in this academia world, and all the students around me and even the professors were going along with this. And so I wanted to to ask you as a scholar, you know, what do you feel the climate is in academia right now?
Well, this started in academia in the late 20th century, actually. I remember it beginning, and it began with the development of queer theory, as we all know. And at that particular time, I remember what is happening now was happening then. And so in a sense, what's happening now isn't new. Because what was happening in the 1990s was that if you talked about the materiality of sex or women's bodies, that this was important politically and theoretically, you were utterly silenced, as if you were some sort of retrograde, unsophisticated person. And that has just gathered strength and gathered strength until, you know, the consequence is the kind of teaching which you will have got, presumably, where you had no other way of understanding sex and gender whatsoever. So, you know, I applaud your strength of mind in managing to get your head around this, that there are other ways of looking at it, because young women now feel as if they can't. So I'm a little bit out of touch with what's going on in the university now, because I've left and I'm writing all the time now.
Okay, that's good. That's probably better for probably a better life. Yeah.
Yes, I imagine so. I imagine you have quite a lot more freedom of expression.
Absolutely. And of course, I've done what Angela was talking about. It may have been, I think it was Angela, or one of you said something I thought was very true, that actually it's less frightening to speak the truth than to see it and be hiding, being afraid to speak out. It's like the fear gets control of you. I know reasons why women have to do that. I'm not disparaging any woman who does that. They just want to say that over this period of 6 years, I've almost got to this place now where nobody's going to stop me from speaking the truth. I almost, you know, I feel.
Yes, absolutely. I think is Meghan here? I believe Graham was saying that she might be. Well, let's see. I imagine she'll just come in when she wants to. Yes, I agree with you. This, you know, the more that people want to silence me, the more I think, well, I must be onto something, because I certainly don't think that what I'm saying is unreasonable. And I know that there are so many women who say to me that, you know, thank you for speaking out. And in fact, even the dissenters, the opponents, they don't actually say what you're saying is unreasonable. It's more they just don't want you to say it at all. And presumably this is because it isn't unreasonable. I mean, that's the very point, isn't it?
I suppose one of the things for me is...
Hi, Maya.
Hello.
This is so exciting.
Oh, suddenly I can't hear you.
Can you hear us now?
I could hear you, and now I can't. Sorry.
Okay, she's figuring out her audio.
Yeah, she's figuring out. Oh, okay.
Can I just say a couple of things before Maya comes in? Two things. One of the things is the realization that this is also not historically new, as we know, in relation to witch burnings and so on. This desire to stop women from speaking is historical and ancient. So this is another 21st version of it. But I'd like to just talk about the Women's Human Rights Campaign, if I may, before Maya starts talking about what she's doing. One of the things that I'm proud of is in starting the Women's Human Rights Campaign, and I'll explain that a little bit more if you want.
Yes, please.
So what was happening 2 or 3 years ago was that the idea that gender identity was replacing sex. Although we're all understanding that now, and I'm astonished by, you know, that people tweet it all the time, people talk about it all the time. Only 3 years ago, that wasn't properly understood.
No.
When I tried to talk about that, it was as if I was trying to explain something that was too philosophical for people. So what actually happened was somebody knew I was working on that. And as I was walking one day, I got a random phone call from somebody saying, I've had an idea. I won't mention her name because I think she wants to remain anonymous. I've had an idea. Shall we start something called the Women Human Rights Campaign? And you can, I don't know whether you've heard of the Yogyakarta Principles, which were written as it's not a legal document, but it pretends to be, a number of years ago now, which actually goes through the process of how to undermine sex-based rights in law and supplant it with gender identity in law. So the Women Human Rights Campaign was initiated in order to undo that. And we wrote a document which unpicked all of that and put sex back into it and demonstrated the damage that would happen if this was allowed to continue and actually be in law. And at the time, the person who rang me, had a huge vision about all of this. She thought it would be fantastic. And I went along with it with a slight sort of skepticism, thinking, he's thinking very big, but I'm not sure how that will happen. But there was me and two other people who were co-founders and wrote the documentation, and that was Sheila Jeffries and a lawyer called Maureen O'Hara. And we sat and wrote it and met each other in coffee bars and so on. And we launched it in New York. And since then, it's just taken off fantastically. So it's now becoming a global phenomenon, and women are having webinars across the globe talking about how in their different countries, this trans ideology is taking a hold. So women are sharing their knowledge of what's going on in different countries and being mobilized to resist it. So I'm shouting out for the Women Human Rights Campaign. Please join it.
Yes, and we're probably going to talk about this more later in the show, but right now in the United States, we have the Equality Act, which we're waiting to find out if it will pass, and it redefines sex to include gender identity. Yeah. And so, I mean, that poses a serious threat. But Angela, I wanted to ask you to talk about what's behind you, because this also relates to what we were talking about. War is peace, freedom is slavery. So
it's a piece that creates a lot of confusion amongst trans activists, believe it or not. Can you hear me? It's a quote from George Orwell, war is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength. Trans women are women. To highlight, all these things we're talking about, especially when it comes to our right to think, our right to express ourselves, our right to not be silenced. And yes, that's really what it is about. I thought it was, adequate.
Yeah.
It's superb. Hey, Meghan.
Hey, Meghan.
Hi.
Welcome.
Hello. Oh, don't worry. We're having a party. People are just joining and leaving at will.
Yep. How are you, Meghan?
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Okay.
Oh, wait, there you are.
There you are. You can hear us? Excellent. Tell us how you're doing.
Waking up.
Very early. I think we're on the same time zone, Meghan. We're both Pacific time, right?
I'm not Pacific time anymore because I abandoned Canada for Mexico, so it's actually not that early here. It's just early for me. How's everyone doing? Huh?
Oh yeah, good. We've been I think one of the things that we've been talking about is the shocking thing, the shocking demonstration in France. I don't know if you saw that, just women being attacked, pelted with eggs, being called TERFs, and
this happened today?
Yesterday in Paris,
and it's just become so sort of normalized. This idea that that women who are called TERFs can simply anything goes, because they are just so horrible and sort of appalling women, and they must have these most dreadful views. And I do wonder if people who actually use the expression, a lot of the people know exactly what they're doing, But I do think that there's a lot of young people simply just caught up who actually just believe the propaganda that, you know, that no smoke without fire, that these women really are horrible. And it's difficult to know what to do to counteract that.
Right. I was thinking the same thing, Helen, because yesterday in Paris, the assailants of the feminists, when you hear them chanting, I mean, I can't understand them because they're speaking French, but they sound like children. They sound so young and they look so young. And they're throwing eggs and they're painting in red paint that TERFs should die. Where are they getting that this is virtuous and this is okay? Are they being radicalized online? Is that how you guys see it? Or,
I think academia had a lot to answer for. I think, you know, a lot of these youngsters will be in universities as well, to be honest.
Right, it's the universities, yeah.
I mean, it's not only the university, but we know this ideology is very, very prominent in the universities. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, but I do think, and again, this is something that we've said on a number of occasions, that, you know, where are the adults, that you know, there are people who should be saying, no, this is wrong, but the only people who seem to be saying it are women. You know, there are so many men, prominent men, who have just also jumped onto this bandwagon and are willing to denounce women, or certainly not stick up for them. And then I think, you know, this, you know, like, you've got young people who look up to sort of male celebrities, etc., but they're just not speaking out.
And then we are the adult here. We're the only adult in the room. I mean, men benefit. Yes. Why would they? I mean, a lot of men benefit from this, and most of them will never speak about something that they benefit from. Why would they? So it's us. We're the right side, you know?
Yes. Hello, Maya. How are you?
Maya, hello.
Hi, Maya. Welcome. Happy Women's Day.
Nice to see you all.
And what have you been doing today?
I've just come off. I'm doing like web show day. I've just come off the Irish Women's. The Countess didn't fight for this Irish Women's conference, which was really good. And, you know, they are fighting a battle. You know, they're outnumbered and outgunned, and they are fighting a battle that, you know, self-ID was brought in without any of the kind of scrutiny or organization that we've had. So yeah, it was good to talk to them, and hopefully, I hope what's going on in the UK may help other countries. Although, you know, just listening to what's going on in France, it's
well, yes, and what's happening in the US.
And what's happening in the US as well.
Yeah. So Maya, can you tell us about your new organization, Sex Matters?
Yes. So we launched officially on Friday, sexmatters.org. We are a single issue organization with one aim: to re-establish clarity about sex in law, in policy, in language and culture, starting at least initially with a focus on the UK, but we hope that, you know, progress that we make in the UK will help other places. It's non-partisan, you know, it's not just for feminists, it's not just for women, it's really lowest common denominator, because everything else is built on top of an understanding of material reality and freedom of speech. We can talk about the things that we don't agree on, you know, we can talk about the nuances sort of down the road, but the very basic of being able to talk about sex and having laws that are based in material reality, and having policies that follow the laws, and having, you know, institutions that allow the laws to protect us is, you know, is so basic, that applies to everybody. And it feels like, you know, we'll know when this is, I think we all kind of came into this thinking it'll be done by Christmas, right, Heather? It'll be done by Christmas 6 years ago, because it's so obvious. And, you know, and I think we know now it's not going to be done by Christmas, but this isn't a forever project. There will, you know, we're not building a stone wall, because at some point this job will be done, because at the point where people turn around and say, yeah, of course, sex is real, sex matters, like, it's obvious, then we can pack up and go home. But I do think there's a kind of medium-term project to be done, which needs an organization. And we've got this amazing grassroots, all of these small organizations that have started up, and all of these individuals and groups. But we're in a David and Goliath situation, and it's comical to hear the likes of Crispin Blunt saying, "Oh, they're well funded." And you're like, well, how many paid members of staff do we have in the whole of this movement? 0. So if we're well funded, where is the money going?
Yeah, where is the money?
So,
yes.
Yeah, where is the money? So we are looking for the money, because I think we need to have people, we need to have press officers, we need to respond to the kind of whack-a-mole of policy. We need to have capacity, and that has to get beyond very small groups of individuals who we're kind of operating like ISIS cells at the moment, because it's so underground. And I think we've reached a point now in the UK where one of the Lords said, we had this amazing debate in the House of Lords a couple of weeks ago, and one of the Lords said it's the end of the beginning. I hope it's the end of the beginning, but it won't be done by Christmas.
No, absolutely. I do think that at least I think that end of the beginning thing, it is quite interesting, because the beginning did actually require a lot of people to finally sit up and take notice. And I do think people are understanding it now. This was something that only a few people were talking about only 3 or 4 years ago. It is mainstream now. It hasn't become mainstream in the way that I would have liked. I thought that everyone would be, of course these women have a point, as opposed to where it does seem to be going, which is a lot of people saying, why are these women even bothering? What does it matter?
Right.
It's like, when you buy pears and they sit in the fruit bowl and they're hard for 2 weeks, and then they're tasty for about 30 seconds, and then they go mushy. We'll miss it, right? And then everyone will be going, yeah, what were they talking about? But, at least we'll get there.
Well, it's also, to quote Sasha Ayad, who is a gender therapist, and she has a podcast where she's talked about when there's something where there's a collective lie and it requires brave people to stand up and speak the truth. Some people have it in them to be the first one, right? Like some people can. I'm sorry, I'm hearing an echo. Is that just me, or does it sound okay for you guys?
No, you're okay. Yeah, you're okay.
Okay, sorry. And so some people have it in them to be that first person, but most people don't. Some people have it in them to be the second or the third, and then the majority will follow. But everybody kind of has a different stage where they find their courage to stand up. So the end of the beginning, it is very hopeful, because it does open the door for a lot more people to be able to join.
What I find
It does.
I've done a lot of flyering, locally. I live in Wales in a very small community, and we've done quite a lot of flyering with our local resistance group. And what I find is that the normal people who are not queer or not gender, who don't know about gender, as soon as you start explaining to them in very simple terms, because it is a simple issue, and you remove all the jargon and all the confusing things, they are all like, what is going on, right? And this will stay, I think. The fear element is really important as soon as people women especially get targeted. But this common sense will always stay. We have to keep this in mind. It's not, the word is not Twitter.
No.
Right. Thank God.
No, but it does matter, as I think Meghan will attest, that you were on Twitter for a while, and it actually, as a journalist, it really matters to you. But
yeah,
you were.
Well, yeah, no, the Twitter thing matters a lot to me in terms of my ability to work, for sure. I do. I talk to a lot of people in real life in general, but also about this stuff, about what's going on in the world. And there's almost nobody that, if you talk to a stranger sitting next to you at a cafe or a restaurant or a bar, people don't talk to strangers enough. I swear to God. If people got out in the world and had conversations with regular people and strangers, you would feel so comforted, because nobody buys into what, Twitter pretends everyone is buying into and on board with. People don't even have to think about it. It's not a debate, people can see that it's obviously crazy or silly or dangerous. You don't have to convince, like, I don't sit around trying to convince people of my opinions ever. So it's like exhausting. I mean, in real life, that's my job,
Yes.
right? So, I'm just having regular conversations. I don't want to have like, intense debates when I'm out trying to have fun or whatever. But, people, it's so funny to me, funny in like a dark way, that what a tiny minority of people believe or are trying to push on everyone else has somehow become the norm and the mainstream. And not somehow, I mean, we know why it's happened. It's happened because the media because social media corporations have gotten on board, and because the media, the liberal media, the mainstream media, whatever you want to call it, they've fully gotten on board. And so it gives this completely warped impression of what is normal. It's not normal. Nobody thinks it's normal. Nobody actually believes, well, I shouldn't say nobody, but 99% of the people in the world, nobody actually believes that women should be forced to compete against men in sport or share prison facilities or change rooms. Like, it's amazing that these minority of like elites essentially have been able to pretend as though something is normal that's not normal, or mainstream that's not mainstream, or that that everybody just believes you can change sex. Nobody believes that.
I
know. Heather, did you want to say something?
I just jump in here. I think what Meghan says and what we're all saying is on the one hand very true. If you walk down the street or chatting to somebody, most people will think that it's completely unreasonable for a male-bodied person to be in women's sports. So that is that part of it. But there's another really dark and very frightening part of it, that this small minority of people have got a hold of our institutions and our laws. So, but I want to bring the issue of children up here. I think the ideology that children can be born in the wrong body has actually infiltrated right through to the ordinary person. If I can remember, until very recently, until the success of the Kira Bell case, in discussing children with people would say, oh yes, but it must be really awful for a child to be born in the wrong body. And these are people who have not been following the whole issue of trans in any way whatsoever, but they have got it into their minds somehow or other that people can be born trans. And our education system and policies are based around this idea of treating children as if they're in the wrong body. So that's just one example of how serious this has become. Even though it's a tiny minority of people pushing it, it has been very, very effective.
Oh, sorry, we've got Cara, I think.
Hey, Cara.
Hello.
Hello.
Wow, you're out in the field.
Hi from the National Mall in Washington, D.C. I'm standing right next to the Washington Monument. We just had a really exciting and inspiring rally. You can probably hear them behind me. They just chanted "Women Seize the Day" over and over for you all and for Posey. So we're having a great time out here.
Excellent. And
excellent.
Tell us what are you marching for? What's going on in our government right now that people should be aware of?
So this event in particular is to protest President Biden's executive order, which seeks to erase women and girls as a protected category in federal administrative law. We're here, the Washington Monument is behind the White House. The White House is behind me right now. You can't see it, but we're talking directly to President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris about the executive order and how it's bad for women and girls. And we're also talking a little bit, but less so, about the so-called Equality Act, which is before the U.S. Congress, which Majority Leader Charles Schumer could bring to a vote at any time.
And how's the energy out there?
Oh, it's great. Can you see?
Yeah.
Can you hear? They're
Yeah,
all
we can
singing
see.
and dancing and chanting. It's over, but we've been out here for a couple hours now, and it's been really, really great. The energy is great. You know, I didn't hear the beginning of your conversation, so I don't know what all you've covered, but I feel like there's a change, right? There's a change that I think a lot of us can feel, that's palpable, and some of you may know that we recently got almost 1,600 signatures from women and men all around the world on a letter to Majority Leader Schumer explaining to him why he should not bring the Equality Act to a vote. And we garnered almost 1,600 signatures in 2 days from people all over the world in over 40 countries. It's pretty astonishing. I really feel like things are changing.
Do you think it will? No. I certainly we've been talking about how many women there are now compared to even sort of 3 or 4 years ago who are sort of being shocked by what's happening. But do you think that you are going to be able to influence the government at all?
Well, so in my speech that I gave today, I demanded that the president rescind the executive order. I'm under no delusions that he's actually going to do that. However, one thing that the executive order does is it gives agencies 100 days. The 100 days is April 30th of this year to come up with a plan, right? That they don't have to actually change the law within 100 days. What they have to do within 100 days is to come up with a plan to do, what we would say is erasing women and girls in the law. So we plan to do a lot of advocacy at the federal administrative level with all of the agencies that where this is really going to impact women and girls, like obviously the Department of Education, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, which operates federally funded domestic shelters and homeless shelters, the Department of Health and Human Services, the Department of Justice, which oversees crime statistics and our prison system. So we are going to be doing this advocacy. And although I do not think that President Biden is going to rescind his order, I do think there's an opportunity for us to really educate federal officials within the agencies and to really help them understand why this is so bad. Now, what's going to happen in Congress with the Equality Act is anyone's guess. If Majority Leader Schumer brings it before a vote, the Democrats will probably vote to pass it. There's a question about whether the Republicans can prevent that from happening. I don't know what the outcome of that's going to be. If current debate is any indication, of course, the president will sign it if it gets to his desk. And then we just have more work to do.
Well, honestly, that sounds fantastic. The work I think that's going to happen there. Honestly, I genuinely believe that so many more women are just going to wake up and say, we need to do something about this.
Right.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Good for you. And I'm really happy that you're having an excellent celebration as well.
We're having such a good time. And if it's okay with you, I think I'll get back to it. I'm having a little trouble hearing.
Sure. Okay. Well, thank you so much for dropping in.
Thanks, Kara. Has everybody here heard of the super straight movement?
Yes.
Yeah.
I did see that yesterday.
Perfect t-shirt.
A bit.
What does your shirt say for people who aren't able to read that? Super dyke.
Like,
Amazing.
all right.
So this is a bit more of a hopeful note, right? And it kind of goes back to what Meghan was saying about how your everyday person really does not buy this stuff. And if anyone doesn't know, the super straight movement, if you can call it that, was started by a 16-year-old boy who just made a video of himself saying, I'm straight. I don't date trans women. I date women born women. He actually used those words. And then it unleashed a wave of people mimicking him, but also a wave of vitriol. And he took down the video temporarily because there were death threats against his mother. But the number of people who stood up and said, I'm super straight, or I'm super lesbian, or I'm super gay, or I'm super bi, it was remarkable.
Yeah, that's exactly like, if you talk to, I think that like straight men are like the most, obviously women
Well,
aren't
know what
taken
a woman
seriously. Yeah. No straight man is going to date, a man if he's super straight, obviously. And I mean, it goes to show that you can repeat mantras as much as you want, and you can try to push your like academic theories on people, your postmodernism, you can push pronouns on people, but at the end of the day, everybody knows the truth. And you know, you can't force people to change their biology or their sexuality based on, you know, political trends or social media trends. I know, I thought that kid was so great, like his TikTok video.
I thought it was quite interesting that, you know, it's women have been talking about this for years, and you get a 16-year-old boy come along and say it, and it's viral. I mean, I think in part it's because he is 16 though, and TikTok is for young people, and you know, it went viral on TikTok.
And because he's obviously not politicized, you know, we're treated, you know, when women talk about these things, we're treated as though we have some kind of political motivation, and we do, of course, have a political motivation, but there's more than one reason why I talk about these things. One of those reasons is, of course, the threat to women's sex-based rights and women's safety. But the other reason is also that it's just silly and irrational. And, you know, and I'm not going to lie or say crazy things just because Twitter wants me to, or because of pressure from, social pressure or whatever. But, you know, it's just like, he's stating the obvious. It's the emperor has no clothes thing, right? He's just stating the obvious, and people don't know what to do about that because they can't brush those kinds of people off like they brush us off as, you know, hateful, bigoted, radical feminist, crazy extremists. Like, oh, he's just some teenager. He doesn't know anything about TERFs.
I wanted to bring the lesbian perspective because we've been working on exactly the same issue. The cotton stealing is the same thing. Obviously, it's different because we are women and we are constantly targeted, you know, sexually. But this is exactly the same thing. And when I explained the cotton stealing to people, I got two reactions: straight women who immediately understand it, and they're like, you know, this is disgusting. I mean, I think it's a universal thing that unfortunately every woman understands what it means to be sexually predated on and disrespected and have our boundary broken. And when I speak to men, it's not very often, I have to admit, but when I do, they're like, oh, do you know, this is very confusing. And so I always say, well, would you like, you know, another penis in your bed, you know? And this is exactly it. I don't understand what the confusion is. For lesbians, it's the same, exactly the same. We don't want it. And I don't understand why it's been so confusing for so long. So Meghan, of course, you know, you've got the point. And the other thing I wanted to say is that in terms of legalities, in terms of the law, in terms of our rights, what we see for lesbians is the erasure of the meaning of lesbian. We are technically protected under the Equality Act, you know, because of our sexual orientation. And what we see is that it's completely wiped out by the right for the, how do I say this? Because men who identify as lesbians' rights are just more important than ours. So it becomes absolutely meaningless for us, which is what we do. It was an interesting, super straight thing.
I did see, though, of course, in a typical fashion, he had to take his video down because they went after his mother.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, what can you say about that? It's just obvious, isn't it?
I mean, somebody in the comments, Brittany in the comments, just said the misogyny is just so obvious. And it is, it's maddening because, you know, it's so obvious that women are being targeted. It's so obvious that this is a backlash to the women's movement. It's so, you know, the fact that so quickly it has become not only acceptable to be so hateful and abusive towards women, but celebrated. You know, any progressive person, any young person, you know, I get these like essentially teenagers, these like young kids posting these comments on my, you know, my posts on my social media telling me that I'm like, oh, you must really hate yourself if you like hate trans people this much, or like, you know, you're terrible, you're a TERF, or, and also way, of course, much worse, you know, go die in a fire. These little girls standing outside our protests with their cardboard guillotines and so on and so forth. And, you know, the hatefulness they know that they know they'll get away with it, but they know that they'll be applauded for it,
Right.
by other men, but by other women too. It's just this like misogynist movement that's taken hold and is being celebrated, and I just feel like everyone is thrilled. Everyone who actually hates actual feminism, whatever that means anymore, now is like, oh great, I can be open about this. Thank goodness for this.
Right. Why in the world do those kids who threw the eggs at the feminists yesterday in Paris feel that they'll be rewarded? Because I think that's clear that they do feel they'll be rewarded socially.
I don't know what happened in Paris yesterday. Sorry, I totally missed all this. I haven't been online today at all. What happened?
Well, so there was a radical feminist group who went out to protest prostitution and the sexual exploitation of women in Paris. And they were cornered and assaulted by a group of what they called queer activists. And at first they were shouting "swerf" at them, which we all know it's sex worker exclusionary radical feminists, the most ridiculous thing. Of course, how could it even exist? There's not a single radical feminist who would want to exclude a prostituted woman. And then they threw eggs at them, and they, tore their signs, they roughed them up, they painted in red paint, as Helen said earlier, "Save a trans, kill a TERF," and then they posted, videos of it online.
Gross.
But I think I think there's more to it here as well, is that actually the mob really likes to go after women, don't they? I mean, you do see, it's it's even in porn, like just gangs going after sort of helpless women. I'm afraid that a lot of men really quite like that idea of sort of just like a group harassing women, and it's just so appalling. But
I mean, it's not just men. Like, it's hard to talk about it because it's like, I agree that it's misogynist behavior, but I mean, a lot of the people who've been horrible to me have been women,
And I believe it was a woman who threw the egg. I'm not 100% sure about that, but there were a lot of women there who were part of the abusing group.
But queer is a patriarchal ideology, and yes, women are, like anybody else, able to reproduce and implement patriarchal ideology, but it is a movement that is created, forced, and violently enforced by men for men's purposes. And I think it really is important to remember that when we get targeted by women, which happens.
I think it's more complicated than that, but I agree that's part of it. I mean, I think that so much of this has to do with academia and people who've just entirely lost touch with reality. I mean, I said elites before, and I don't necessarily mean the wealthy. I mean the liberal elites, the people who are working in media, the middle class, people living in the West, people with jobs in academia, people with, jobs in institutions and government and so on and so forth, and have totally lost touch with what women's rights, what that means and why it matters. I don't think they know. I don't actually think they believe that women's rights matter or are necessary or are a relevant thing anymore, because they're so privileged, and they don't pay attention to what's going on in the rest of the world when it comes to women. And so, I mean, I'm not disagreeing with you. Of course we're talking about women and we're talking about women's rights, but I also think, I think women get on board, obviously, because they know they'll be supported in doing so, especially young people. I mean, young people want to be validated. Young people want to be accepted. Young people want to be applauded. And if they can do that by harassing and threatening and attacking bad women, then they will. But yeah, I think it's kind of just this big circle jerk of liberal elites patting each other on the backs for saying the right thing. And they don't care, as long as they're good, as long as they've got their cushy job, they'll say whatever. I mean, these are just people who have no integrity at the end of the day.
But I also think that what is happening is is what women have often done, is that they know that unless they are with the men, they may get targeted by the same misogyny. So far better to be part of it than to be an object of it. So, you know, Andrea Dworkin talked quite a lot about this as well, the way that women will participate in movements that, in fact, are against their own best interests, and they do it to be safe. So, you know, you can really see how young girls will participate in this. You know, they're included, they're part of the crowd, they'll get accolades for it, and nobody will target them.
Right.
No,
So
I agree. I have to say, from my own research, I see that how violent the queer movement is, and women who are in the queer movement are like victims of violence. And this is a response when you take the the view of the colonizers, is because you have been violently, it's been violently enforced on you. So I completely agree on your point for that.
We're coming up to, well, we've passed an hour now, so I think we should try and wrap it up. I'm trying to think about what this next year will bring. I'm hoping that next International Women's Day we can have a massive party,
yes.
and we can all be together. Those of us who are in the same country, and let's have a big screen for those people who can't, and let's maybe try and have a big international party, and hopefully we'll have a lot more to celebrate. You know, there are new groups that are setting up all the time. Maya, I'm very excited about yours. I think, you know, I'm really excited to see what it's going to do. I think you're absolutely right about the need for a big sort of concerted group to absolutely lobby for sex-based rights. So what are you hoping that the next year will bring?
Yeah, I think I'm hoping, you know, the fever will break. I think when you reach a tipping point, things can tip very quickly. You know, with people, once people can see that other people speaking up, and, you know, that nobody believes this, you know, once the Emperor's New Clothes are revealed, you know, yeah, people will turn around and say, well, of course, we didn't ever believe that, and, you know, you made a big fuss about nothing. But I think that, you know, I think that can happen quickly. At least in the UK, it feels like that.
Yes. Well, on that note, I think that's a nice positive note of hope. I'm going to say thank you so much for everyone for joining us, and thank you again, Graham, for giving us your platform for the evening.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Good to see everyone.